I would like to welcome all of our attendees, our moderator, and our panelists to the RDI Career Development Series webinar on hiring and onboarding. Before we get started, I would just like to say a huge thank you to our sponsors, TMS Lighting, Planet Construction, Shop Association, and VMSD. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our expert moderator, Ms. Margot Jacqz. Take it away.
Expert. Good question. I am Margot Jacqz, for those of you who don't know me, and I am a recruiter and executive search consultant. And I've been working for decades with architects and with a wide range of design organizations to help them find the best people for their business goals. So this is an interesting problem for me. And in the series today, we've looked at self-development and we've looked at leadership. And this afternoon, we're talking about hiring and onboarding, which also includes the role of the employer. And it's something we're going to touch on. And the conversation is about who to hire and where to work. And we've got some some interesting perspectives on it. And I want my panel to introduce themselves. Let's to my right, Jennifer Graham.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. I am an interior architect. I'm a principal of the workplace group at Perkins and Will New York office. My career has focused on project management. However, I do think of myself as a design project manager. I'm an expat, so I've relocated and am now a citizen of the United States. So I have multiple perspectives of hiring, culture, people from different ethnicities and diverse groups. And being in New York City is a great place to be practicing this profession. So thank you. Thank you, Margot.
And Charlotte.
Thanks, Margot. I'm Charlotte Lee. I'm an executive coach, and I've been coaching for almost 20 years. I have run 5 nonprofits, and I ran my own firm as well. I have a 5-star book on Amazon called How to Find Your Perfect Job. And I think the thing that I'm most proud of is that they figured out the number of people I've coached. It's over 10,000 now. And so I'm really pleased to be here to share with everyone and learn.
And Julie.
Hey, everybody. I'm Juliana Strieff. I'm the creative design director for Panera Bread. I've been designing and building restaurants for about 20 years, ranging from small boutique firms to little burger company called McDonald's and like everywhere in between. So spent quite some time getting hired, hiring people, finding my sweet spot. So I'm thrilled to be here to talk about this with everybody today.
Excellent. I just want to say I'm probably not going to be monitoring chat or Q&A, but Catherine, our voice of God from RDI, will be doing that. And if you have any throughout the whole thing, just pop them in the Q&A or pop them in the chat. I want to start. We got a process in hiring and onboarding that sort of starts with deciding that you need to hire someone, interviewing people, and applying from the perspective of the candidate. You apply from the perspective of the employer. You interview people, and then you bring them in. What happens once you've accepted a job and you start to join a company. So let's start with the idea that companies have been reevaluating their ways of working, and they've balanced their staffing, tactically and strategically for diversity and technology reasons, among a lot of others. And I'm going to start with Jennifer. When you decide that you need to add people to your community, how do you consider the balance internally in crafting a position description, tactically and strategically, and how do you make clear the expectations, short and long term, and then decide what to present publicly when you post or otherwise represent opportunities to people that you want to have apply?
Business needs.
You don't have 3 days for this.
business needs, we identify needs based on our workload. In other words, we've got more work than we can fulfill with the staff we have. We look at the balance across our portfolio or our studios, and we identify at which level we need staff. So senior, mid, entry level. So it's pretty straightforward. Once we've decided we need staff, we approach it like scatter. The first and best place is referrals from people who work here. Next best place is people who used to work here and are very favorable towards the company. We, of course, reach out to recruiters for strategic placement. So sometimes we don't have an immediate need. We have a strategic need, so we call Margot, or we will publish. We always have positions published on our website. So we have a very broad approach. We try to keep, just like how you try to keep your portfolio of projects and backlog in place, you also want to keep interviewing so that you always have a portfolio of people that may be good for the company and they are interested. So that's kind of like a very broad view.
And then when you say, I need this, and you have to craft a position description, and I know it depends on the nature of the position, but how important are the sort of soft bits versus the skill set? You know, the old saying,
Sure.
hire for attitude, train for skill.
Okay, so two different approaches. One, when we are posting positions, of course, the job descriptions are written by level and they are written by corporate. They are reviewed by each market because there might be nuances to job descriptions for interior designers, interior architects versus base building. So we do get an input from leaders in the office. That's what's the technical aspect of the position. The soft skills are posted not only our website, but we are very in tune with, we're looking for certain types of individuals who are design focused, who are curious, who have an aptitude for learning. So the first thing you want to do is identify, is the person going to survive well in your culture? And not all firms have this approach, but our firm wants to build culture and build a dynamic design-focused practice. So we're first looking for the people who we think there's a good synergy. And if we find a good synergy, then we look at the skill sets second. But assuming that people who are coming to us, they have a basic skill set level for the level that they are applying for.
Right. Charlotte, Juliana, anything to say about job descriptions? You know, that magic little piece of paper where somebody in an earlier conversation said, if it includes other things as necessary, say they run away from those as fast as possible. You know, what can you do with a job description to make it clear, tactical, but not confining or not too vague?
Well, I'll jump in on that just a little bit and give also, I think, from the perspective of, you know, both sides of this as a job seeker and a seeker of people. I think that we need to approach, as designers, we have to approach the job description the same way we would any other task. And we have to design it to lure our people in. And I think, you know, I really liked what Jennifer talked about, how at Perkins and Will, they're creating this culture of, you know, curious, hungry, design-oriented individuals. And I think that that's the hardest thing to really both convey in a job description, as well as understand from both a candidate and a potential employer, because you can talk to 20 different people and ask them, what is, you know, you could say, we have good culture, we care about culture, and that's going to mean 20 different things to people. So I really think it's on the hiring manager and the employer to not only be really specific about what that means for your organization, but the onus is also on the job seeker to understand what that means when people say we've got a great culture, because there are some employers that will, you know, that might mean we're going to burn you into the ground, but we want to know you're committed because, you know, you love design, right? And then there's others that really do care about work-life balance in a meaningful way because they know it informs your context and your perspective as a designer and all that good stuff. So that's a really tricky one.
Yeah,
I
I
would
want to
also add-
explore that a
sorry,
little bit
Margot.
more. I was going to say, I want to explore that a little bit more, but I wanted to bring Charlotte in a little bit.
I was just going to add that I do think that companies, you know, the change has always been around, but the rate of change is unprecedented now. So because the rate of change is so high, I really think folks who are looking at these job specs also need to know that there's stuff that's going to go on behind the curtain that is not in the job spec. Sometimes everything's in the job spec and it looks like the kitchen sink has been thrown together, or they've taken 3 roles and combined them because they've only got one ability to hire one person. So they sort of combine a bunch of stuff. I've seen that, which is very frustrating, of course, but that's what they do. And they need one person and they want the person to be literally, you know, chief cook and bottle washer. So there's a lot of stuff that sometimes
I just finished that search. They actually hired 2 people. So.
There you go. So that happens sometimes, but sometimes you look at a job spec and you think, oh, I really only got 4 of these things. I probably shouldn't apply. Don't feel that way. Don't feel that way. Always take the shot. There's been great research done that women often don't apply. Often don't apply. Majority of women will not apply unless they hit 9 out of 10. Please don't do that. Please apply. If you've got 4 or 5 of them, apply, because it's all about fit. It's not just about content. So 1, I'd say there could be a ton of stuff in there, apply. 2, I'd say there's stuff that's not in there. And then you meet the hiring manager and Jennifer says, you know, Charlotte, what I really need you to do is blank. And I think, oh, crumb, that wasn't even in the job spec. And you don't want to say, well, that's not in the job spec. You want to say, absolutely, Jennifer, I've done that before. And here's how I've done that. So try to maintain your flexibility on understanding that it's not every single word that job's going to be in that job spec. And there also could be a kitchen sink. Move forward anyway, if it's a brand and a company that you like.
And I'd also like to lean in that there are 2 parts to any hire that any position that's presented. I'll give you our experience at Perkins and Will. The job description is only one piece of what's conveyed. The whole other side, and this is pointing to culture or the look behind the curtain, is what else is provided that has nothing to do with your job description. Is there professional development opportunities? What are your internship opportunities? Do you have fellowships? What's the culture like? Do they talk about different initiatives? What is your position, you know, on social media? You know, is there travel involved? There's so many aspects that are not included in the job description. And what we will do is have our very proficient hiring managers look at only the skill sets, but for the professional leaders, we're looking for aptitude. So they're 2 different sides. And to Charlotte's point, you're never going to check every single box. And many times the job description basically will show you within a tier what's expected. So even if you have 4 out of the 10, you could still be hired because you're coming in with less years experience. And you know, by the time you get to the top tier, you will have been trained on all 10 of the 10. So it really is a dialogue, and you want to find a company that fits the culture you're looking for, in addition to you having the skill sets. And, you know, speak to people, go on the website, do your own research before you show up in the interview.
Right. So I can hear people saying, how do I find that out? Are there questions that you guys have experience with? Sort of specifically, let's get a little grainy, for an individual either deciding to apply, going to an interview, or in the interview, that hiring manager is critical. And I don't want to talk about how you present yourself, but I want to talk about how people who are trying to develop their careers, which is what this is about, solicit that information in a way that is not confrontational. And what do they need to watch for? Charlotte, you got some thoughts on what kinds of questions to ask?
Yeah, I mean, I always feel like it's hard to know about culture until you work there. So I do think reading Glassdoor is not going to give you all the answers. And I think everybody thinks reading Glassdoor is going to do it. Stop it. Glassdoor is filled with people who got blown out, who are very ticked off. So try not to focus on Glassdoor. I would do 3 things. I would use LinkedIn and check out people. I'd Google everybody I could possibly find. I'd talk to people who work there and people who worked there. I would talk to their competitors. I would talk to their colleagues. And then I would ask a question like, so what do you love about working here? And they start telling you what they love about it. And you don't write things while people are talking, just listen. And then you say, and what's one thing if you could change that you'd love to change? And it can't be you want more money or more time. And you'd be surprised what comes out of the woodwork. Holy smokes. People tell me all kinds of stuff. I'm always amazed if you give people space and you respect their silence, what they'll tell you. And so if you maintain your eye contact and don't fidget in your chair, they'll tell you all kinds of stuff. And then if you get to physically be there, you can walk around, and if your meeting's at 5:30, you can see if everybody looks harassed. You can see that everyone looks tired. You can see everyone's trying to get the heck out the door. You can see people uneaten lunch on their desk. You can see space and figure out a lot about a culture if you physically get there.
Juliana.
Oh, sorry.
Oops, I'm sorry. I was going to let Juliana step in because I think of the people here, she's in the last couple of years gone through this process a couple of times. So from the perspective of the applicant, how did you decide who to talk to? And then how did you learn whether that was going to be the right thing during the interview process?
Well, first of all, what Charlotte suggested about finding out who works there and speaking to them, that's invaluable. And that was always my first, that's kind of, my go-to move, because design is a really small industry. And depending on what you do and how long you've been doing it, restaurant design, specifically what I will speak to, is a really small industry. You guaranteed you will know somebody that either works wherever it is you want to work or is acquainted somehow, and you can get the intel in a respectful way that you're looking for. That's always the first place. I've never ever gone in cold, and I think that's also a great way to identify where you want to work. See who's doing really interesting things and where are they doing those really interesting things. But I think there's some questions too as part of the interview process, from even just the initial, the internal recruiter or external recruiter, depending on what type of position it is, all the way up to the hiring manager. I found that how people answer questions is almost as telling as what they say. And, for example, the classic of, hey, why is the position vacant? Which I think you have to ask in a more nuanced way, such as, what are you, if it's a new position, what are you hoping to achieve that you don't have with the current structure? Or if it's somebody that's, if it's a replacement or, reallocation, what different outcomes would you like to see? What, how do you see success in a way that maybe you didn't have before? And I think the answer to, the real answers are interesting, but how people answer that question, and do they get kind of shifty? Do they focus on, well, it's really hard to find whatever, like you understand the attitudes of your potential employers when they start to approach questions like that. And also, again, you've got to be nuanced about it. You've got to ask in a productive way, and in a way that's really curious, and with the intention of, I want to do a good job. I want to know what success looks like for you. And mainly, I want to know if I'm the person that can do this well, and if this is something that's, mutually beneficial. But, pay attention to their cues. And are they looking? Do they take a minute? Are they holding back something that they're really trying to say but aren't trying to say? And, it's very telling.
I can't tell you how many times I've cursed at a first interview hiring manager because they have not been properly prepared to answer those kinds of questions. So you kind of wonder what the whole company is like. Jen, I know you want to leap in. Come on.
Well, both from the employer and the prospective employee standpoint, find out who's going to be in the room with you, because if you are, for example, in the first 4 years of your career, you might want to know if someone is going to be in the room that is in their first couple of years, or someone who's a recent hire at the firm. We try to on our side try to balance the interview with senior, mid, and if applicable, a more junior staff member or a recent staff member, so they can share experiences. And I really wouldn't be shy about asking, if you're in an interview and you're interviewing with one person and you get to the next round, you can say, I'm so excited to be invited back. Could you have someone who's filling this position join the interview? I'd love to talk to them. And I don't think that's too forward or too, gutsy, because it really shows your interest.
I had a couple of clients, and one I'm working with now, who the first interview is like one-on-one with the supervisor
Yes.
or studio lead or whatever discipline lead it is. But the second interview, I mean, and this is structured into their process, is a gang interview with at least 4, if not the entire studio that you're going to be working in, which is, you have to know what's coming out of that. And I think it's really interesting, sort of on a tangent, that the career, not just the applicant, but that people who are already working there need to learn how to participate in this.
Yes.
And you have to teach them how to do that. And it's part of your career development, which is how to talk to other people and bring them into your culture.
Yes, very important. Our internship program is not run by principals. It's actually run by 1s through 3s, ID 1s through 3s, or designer 1s through 3s. And they are curated and taught about the interview process and how important internships are important for the firm, because interns many times end up making up future hires. So I agree with you. It is very important that everyone in the firm is as important when it comes to bringing in work or attracting and retaining staff. Everyone.
But the thing is, it used to be every time you walked out the door, you represent us. You're about bringing in work.
Yes, and people.
Now, I mean, but the emphasis on the people seems to have increased tremendously in terms of leadership, understanding of how to drive that down to staff levels.
Agreed.
Are you seeing, I mean, maybe that's just me, but I think that what we're talking about is suddenly a topic of this conversation that would never have been interesting to anyone at a leadership level 10 years ago. But it's how you, where we started, where Jen started, it's how you change the nature of your firm, is person by person. And I think that you go through that process. I don't know if you have any comments on the moment you decide, when you review the candidates that you decided to interview and then the guys that you've interviewed, if you have to make a choice, what prevails? Or is that just really dependent on the options?
I would say, for my experience, because we often will be fortunate to find 2 candidates, sometimes they just end up taking another position and you end up with 1 candidate. We also, if we're really interested in a candidate and we find one that is more suited at the time, we tell the other candidate, can we please stay in contact with you? And that we're in a situation right now. We have made a choice, but we were really impressed with you. And we feel that you could also add value to certain types of projects. And when a position opens, we'd like to reach back, because you'd be surprised how many candidates we have that didn't get hired on the first interview, and they're great people. And so I always say, be honest and tell them how that they are a really good candidate. And just this round, it didn't work out.
So Jen, at this point, just take a moment now to remind everybody, if you have questions, to put them in the Q&A or in the chats. And Jennifer has just kind of opened up the box about the internal structures. What happens next after you've interviewed? you join a company. I want to go back to Juliana about this sort of process, because again, as you've been joining, what is onboarding, right? You know, I'm sure you have comments on both cultural and strategic. I mean, in onboarding, when a client candidate, an employee at that point, first joins a company, what are the important things, short-term, long-term? And the softball question is there a structured timeline, and how important is that? And what is it? And how do you convey what it is?
Yeah, it's a great
No,
question.
you've both joined and you are now hiring people, and you have that
Right.
problem too. So you
Right.
get both sides of this conversation.
Well, and I think this is one of those areas too, where everybody feels they don't have time to properly onboard, because if you're hiring somebody, you probably needed them to be there months before and getting them up to speed. You know, you can't possibly get them up to speed fast enough. At the same time, I think it's kind of like a first date. You've got one shot to make a great lasting impression and set some groundwork and kind of, you know, I mean, you could certainly address it later on, but I think that there's two keys, and really from both sides of it. One is to make the time very clearly, understand what this person needs to be successful, make the time in not only your own schedule, but the team schedule and anybody cross-functionally this person will be working with, to ensure that they have enough headspace, breathing room, and all of the tools they need to get up to speed. But then I think, you know, it's kind of a classic, but the old 30, 60, 90, you know, get not only what you expect the person to be or where you expect them to be 30 days in, 60 days in, 90 days in, but I like to do the opposite and actually ask them what they think, where they think they should be 1 month in, 2 months in, 3 months in, because it's really interesting to see where the perceived gaps are. And that's almost kind of like a first assignment that I'd like to give. You know, we'll flesh it out, and then, you know, we'll come back in a week, and I'd like your ideas as a candidate of where you see, you know, after you've had a little bit of situation. I think that does a few things that makes it really clear what needs to be done. And sometimes you really don't know that as an employer or as a candidate. You don't know what you don't know until you get in there, until you start working. And I think, you know, Charlotte mentioned that about culture, but that's true for even just the functional aspects of the job. So that 30, 60, 90 day from both sides, I think is really, really critical to getting that done.
So Charlotte, I'm sure you have some thoughts on what candidates can do to learn that quickly, to arrive at that next third week interview with saying, here's what I need going forward.
No, about here's what I need going forward. I'd say two things. One is there's a great book by a guy named Michael Watkins called The First 90 Days. And I agree with Juliana, nothing's better than every single person on this phone having a 90-day plan. Whether you're in a job or looking for a job or thinking about it, you need a 90-day plan for your life. If you had it and you were going to start it, what would you do? So to me, this is all about prep. And I think it's very important. The second thing I do always with candidates is I make them put together an org chart of the group that they're going into and thinking about. Put an org chart together. Who sits where, who reports to whom, what do they do, how do they do it? And as you meet them, make little notes in their box so that you've got in there, Charlotte lives there and she's half Chinese and she's celebrating the Chinese New Year and it's the year of the rabbit. I mean, your job is to make connections with everyone in your new role. So put the org chart, put the people in it, and make sure that you keep very good notes without them seeing them, because they each learn, give you something to learn for the next one. And you use the info that you learned at that one for the next one. And it just builds and builds, and it's accretive right away.
I love that suggestion with the org chart. We actually create org charts for all of our teams anyway, and we do share them with new team members, but you actually overtly saying that and having an individual make notes is very helpful. In addition to, you know, while you're in your team, because if you come to work at a large company, it is overwhelming. Whatever they tell you on the first day you're not going to remember anything. So how you are welcomed is very important. In my experience at actually the last 3 firms, the first day, in addition to your basic technical orientation, someone connects with you, takes you to lunch, and is the buddy for the first week. But then on a macro scale, when you work with a really big company, how easy do they make it for you to learn who everybody is? And we have in our pantry, we have a little cube that has everybody's face on. And now we're going to add names at the back. So how easy does the culture provide information so you can bond with the people who are there? Are there happy hours? Are there lunch sessions? Are there lunch and learns? Are there vendor trade shows? Ask about what are the various things that are not related to your job, your professional job, that will help you learn about how the office runs if you're in a particular location. That's a bit more difficult if you are primarily a remote employee. I'm talking if you're in the office, because my experience is the firms that I have worked with, and actually my peers that I know, most of their employees are in the office at least 3 days a week, if not 5. So maybe someone can talk a bit more about experience if you're a remote employee, because I think that's much more difficult to engage with and become embedded within a culture.
I love that question. And I can take it for a minute if you'd like. I've hired in the last year of the a number of different people, but it's a fully distributed team. 3 different time zones, got somebody in Seattle, somebody in Florida, somebody in the center of the country. And, it's a real challenge you have to go out of your way to make moments that naturally occur, like the water cooler talk doesn't naturally occur. I think that, in this environment where with a distributed team like that, it's very easy to be very tactical and to be very transactional. And our meeting starts at 10 and it goes until 10:55. And then I've got 5 minutes to grab some tea before the next one. And it's very, very easy for that to be the whole day. And I've personally found that I've had to schedule in, as silly as this sounds, water cooler time.
Yeah.
Hey, ping so-and-so and see how they're doing. Reach out to somebody said they were seeing their aunt this week. It seems really silly, but I think it's important to have those moments. And if they're not happening organically, you have to find ways for them to happen, because people care. I mean, people want to feel connected, and you have to foster that, I think, more deliberately when you have a remote or a distributed team.
100%.
Yeah, I agree.
And they're actually saying that that's what it's all about, Juliana. They're saying people want to belong. If you give them another $5, they're not focused on the $5. They're focused on belonging. They're focused on feeling impact. They're focused on being a part of something bigger than them. So that's the whole point of the workforce now, versus, I'm a lot older than a lot of people here, but versus many, many years ago when I started working. So it's very much now about some of the soft skills and some of the things that matter to people, whether it's a free lunch or remembering my birthday. I had 19 people on my team, and I instituted, when we went remote, a Friday morning huddle. It was optional, didn't have to come if you didn't want to. We laughed, we exchanged, what did you do? What do you got going this weekend? We had birthday parties. We had a Chinese New Year celebration. Everyone on my team showed up in, so red is my color for Chinese New Year. Everybody on the team showed up in a red top or something red, a red scarf. It was just so heartwarming. And those team building things were the best team building of my life. And I've worked for 43 years, and it was remote.
Yeah.
So it's not easy to do, but you're right, Juliana. If you are not specific on making it happen, those birthday, Chinese New Year things don't happen. And you got to make them happen to keep your people. And to me, it's not about getting the people, it's retaining them. The retention is really dropping precipitously. And I get those calls. So it's retention. And so you really want to give them some virtual love.
But actually, interestingly, adding in, even though most of us are in the office, we're not all in the office at the same time. So we do the same thing. We have a Wednesday roundup where everyone is joined to participate the roundup, because you're working with distributed teams from other offices. You're working with people who may not jive with your schedule. So even when you have a physical landing pad, you're still having to foster those team building relationships, regardless of whether you're in person or not. So I love Charlotte bringing that as an emphasis. It's not, we spend the majority of our life at work. And if you're not providing a craveable work environment, people will crave something different somewhere else.
I think this might be a good time to interject a question from our audience. As a candidate, I like to get, this is the question, by the way. As a candidate, I like to get feedback on how I did during the interview and application process. I found that some companies and recruiters are not used to hearing this question. What is your position on this, and when and what is the best way to approach it?
I love that question because I call feedback the F word. It's bad. Asking for feedback is a trigger, and people may disagree with me on the call, but the only way to get feedback is in the moment. So when I'm interviewing, I say to Jennifer, this role is something I really thought about for a long time, and I'm excited about it because of this. And I thought I was well aligned because of this. And I was wondering if there was something you thought I was missing or that wasn't quite clear. And if you could chat with me a little bit about that, I'd really appreciate it. I have now told her how engaged I am, how much I care about this role, how I think I fit, and whether she's going to hire me or not. So you got to have some chutzpah and bring it up in the meeting. Please don't send me an email thanking me, asking me for feedback, because I have news for you, 0 chance that's going to happen. 1, it's discoverable in an email. 2 is you didn't have the nerve to bring it up to me, and I'm pretty darn approachable. I mean, I'm a little scary. Okay, I'm a little scary, but most of the time I'm approachable. And at the end of the day, you must own this feedback, and I want it to look like you own it. So that would be my recommendation.
I have stories about feedback, and I, as a recruiter, I'm the outsider. So I'm trying to get from the person who interviewed, or sometimes I've got intermediary, right? I'm working with HR and they've got a hiring manager who did the interview, and the hiring manager gets back to HR and says, well, it just didn't work. And we have a saying in recruiting that says too tall, too short, too fat, too thin. Or he didn't like the color of his socks. But this is back to training hiring managers and people interviewing, which is it's incumbent on them to understand how to analyze their interview from their point of view. And it's not just yes or no, it's no because or yes because that then feeds into who they meet next. And the yes because feeds into the onboarding process, because you know how you feel about people and where they're going to fit in a team. So that's I'm just adding that. Jennifer?
When we're interested in a candidate, we always say, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to X and they will get us the question, because that is a clear indication that they want to either bring you back for a second interview or they're interested in hiring you. So think about those cues, and I would not mind if somebody reached out when I offered that. But I agree with Charlotte. If they just randomly sent an email with a bunch of questions or said, I forgot to ask, don't say forgot. Just say, I had this great experience I'm curious about, put everything always in a positive light anytime you ask a question or you've been invited to ask additional questions.
But it's also incumbent on the interviewer, the potential employer, to provide some, and it's very difficult because you're not allowed to say certain things, or you don't want to be misconstrued, or you don't want to do this or that or the other thing. But, to tell somebody, Jennifer had if they're good and you want them to come back for another role, that's easy. If they're less good, how do you prepare them, saying, on what they need to learn from going through that process? Because people do need that feedback so they can learn how they, where they screwed up, if you want to put it really baldly, or why it was the wrong role for them, or, well, you know, there's something to be learned on both sides. And how do you help them do that? Juliana, you're looking kind of like you're thinking.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the question that's, you know, one way to answer this, just to kind of get this out of the way, is depending on how large the organization is that you're working for. And I think Charlotte alluded to this, they're not going to leave a paper trail as to why they didn't hire you. So they're most likely not going to put in an email that doesn't even matter what it is, because it's just typically not to the employer's benefit to put that on paper for a variety of reasons. The other thing, though, I think if I was sitting here kind of pondering it and reflecting, I think that the best thing as an interviewee that you can do is interview more. And I really think that we probably know a lot more about how well we did and why things did or didn't go well than we might want to let on. And it might be easier to have somebody else validate that and tell us why, but we probably innately know, hey, by the types of questions that were being asked. And, you know, usually if you're not getting as an interviewer, if you're not getting the answer you want, you may ask it a few different ways. Like, that's usually a good cue that may be an area that is an opportunity for you. But I mean, the best thing to do is keep interviewing. The more you interview, the better you're going to get at it. And the more you're going to, I think, represent yourself in a positive way, but in a knowledgeable way. And you'll understand not only what makes the kind of employer you want to work for, but you'll know yourself better, and you'll know innately, okay, I could have done this a little bit better. I wasn't as good as that discussion I had with, you know, Firm X 2 weeks ago. That's invaluable experience. Trust your gut, though. You know more than you think, probably.
One of the best pieces of advice I got from my boss was one year was, you know, the most you can do with words is to sync yourself. So watch the over talking. And I find that candidates do over talk and tend to do well in the first minute and then begin to sync themselves as they continue to babble on. So I do think it makes sense to have very good, tightly wound answers. So practice, as you say, Juliana, is the way to go. Practice makes you perfect. And the second thing is to have examples. People say, I'm really good at this, and I'm really good at that, and I'm really good at this, and I do this, I do that. And it sounds a little hollow. So it might make sense to always have your examples at the ready. We called them source stories. There was a situation, there was an obstacle, you came up with an action, there was a result. There's all sorts of different names for them, but have your source stories at the ready. So if somebody says, well, tell me about your project management style, tell me about your leadership style, and you say, I'm highly collaborative, blah, 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 giving examples of that collaboration and how it resulted in a huge success and a win for the company you worked for will really be a tipping point for you in interviewing. Examples.
Mm-hmm. And Margot, I thought you were going to throw in there portfolio and resume review. Practice at your industry organizations, because many of them provide these opportunities for you. Also, to Juliana's point, get feedback away from the place you're interested in going. Do a practice interview with someone before you go to the interview. Talk to yourself in the mirror, be composed and relaxed, but then also ask for informational interviews. I'm interested in working in the company. Is there anyone who can talk to me for 20 minutes? Because informational interviews also give you a lot of information without without burden on either side. And it may be harder to do with small organizations to get informational interviews, but large organizations, even if you don't want to go there, go on LinkedIn, find someone who knows someone there, and just say, can you spend 20 minutes with me? Very few people say no when you show interest.
And guess who they think of
On
when they
there,
have a
I
role to
didn't
fill.
want to open the box for another hour and a half, because I'm sort of still, I keep coming back to this, to the obligations of the company that's hiring and interviewing. And there's no right or wrong way, but it's sort of like, how do you prepare your hiring managers to answer those questions?
Again, I think we control what we control. And right now I'm focusing on the candidate because we don't control the employers. And I don't think you're going to see a paradigm shift on lots of training for interviewing. I've been doing interviewing training for 35 years. And I would say the majority of people I know are terrible interviewers, terrible. And HR is right at the top of not being fantastic. So unfortunately, unless we have a paradigm shift in the world, the stuff that is
I'm just waving that flag because
no.
experience is exactly that. And
That's why we need to equip the candidates. That's why we need to support and equip the candidates to ask the right questions, get out of Dodge if it doesn't seem to fit, watch for telltale signs, and prep.
all right, let's talk about some examples of what are telltale signs. What have you run away from, Juliana and Jennifer, in your careers in searching, making moves, when you've been looking at this at the scenery and the horizon about what you want to do next? I mean, and again, the job seeking is a whole nother thing, but I interview people all the time who want a new job, and I say why, and they have a long list of things that are wrong with where they are, and they haven't figured out what it is they want to do. So I just slap them around and say, tell me what you want. One is finding the right job to interview for. But then once you're doing that, or you think you're doing that, what are some pure examples of how you know that it's wrong? I mean, we all get warm and fuzzy when we know it's right, but how do you know it's not going to work?
That's great. Gosh, I love that question. And I like that you started it too with knowing what you want, because the worst reason to look for any role is because you don't like your current role. That's a good reason to start looking, but that's not a reason to look at a specific role. Like, know thyself all day long is going to help you out. But as far as red flags go, there have, where to start? I mean, what do we have? 5 minutes left. I mean, I think I've had situations.
I don't want you to compromise yourself.
Oh, no. But what I mean is, I think to Charlotte's point, it's not, interviewing isn't the strong suit of, I think, most individuals, and especially in the design world, where we're not always the most business focused folks. And I think I've had, some questions that for me personally have been red flags is when the interviewer is very much focused on either transactional aspects of the job or things that are telling me that my values are not aligning with the values of the company and the values of the position. And to be a little bit more specific, let's say I'm looking for a role that is either strategic in manner or is involved, with a number of different groups. And all the questions we're being asked are, how are you with Revit? And how, like, things that are telling me, okay, this, and maybe they don't sync with the job description. So, I think that's a red flag when the questions that are asking you don't back up the picture that are being painted in the job description or the bill that you were sold by the recruiter. And I think another one too is how you're treated during the negotiation phase for salary and other benefits. And I walked away from positions where it was really clear that I would not be valued. And I don't mean that they didn't offer me the comp, but just because of the way, the tone of the negotiations, it's like, this is how it's going to be before I even show up. It's not going to improve. So, I mean, I think you have to just pay attention to the tone, the interaction with every single person you have in the organization at every level at the interview. But that's what I look for, those little things that maybe aren't even the answers to the questions I'm asking, but they say a whole lot.
I don't think I could top your response, Juliana. I think that's really spot on. I will say I've been fortunate not to have too many of those situations once I've gotten to a point I've been interested in the company. And I think it's because I've been lucky. That's one thing. And second, I've always asked myself, how relevant am I to this firm? And that's really important, because if you can't fit the big bill, and if you've done your research and you don't feel like it's a place where you're going to be aligned, then you're taking the position because you need a stopgap. and then it's kind of not good on either side. So I think your answer was really spot on. Just trust your gut. And I've been in 2 negotiations in my careers where I took less pay going into the jobs, but they were places that I had to be, and I was encouraged by them saying, look, you're coming to a large company and you've only been at a smaller company, and we really think that you're going to be able to advance quickly here. If you're shown, and this was early in my career, it's not now, but if you're shown that level of encouragement, don't discount that, because sometimes you may be at a very small firm and very well compensated, and then you go to a very large firm, but you just haven't had the breadth of experience they're looking for, but you can grow. So read between the lines, and if they want you, ask the questions. If they don't want to answer those questions, well, it's not the place for you.
So circling back in one way to where we started, the message to employers is to know where these people are going to go, not 30, 60, 90 days, but to give them a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, to be prepared to, explain, be very clear about your expectations, which are both immediate and long-term. And, as somebody, I don't know where I read this, but somebody said, you shouldn't be having exit interviews. You should be having, why are you staying with us interviews? So that's the message to employers. And I think to candidates, that's what you should expect. You should expect a company who wants to hire you to have a place for you to go, a framework once you're there. And everybody said, clients say they're going to do that, but this is back to researching, to talking to people who are in the firm, because the firm DNA doesn't change that quickly. You may be talking to a manager who says, but this is what we want to do. But if they haven't done that in the last 10 years, you have to decide whether you think they're going to do it now, which is why you ask the questions that, as Charlotte's been talking, we've all been talking about, which is, as you interview, it's incumbent on you as the candidate to do as much as you can to get that, to have that feeling and to sort of connect as quickly as possible once you're on board with the team and with the organization. And both sides are responsible for making that happen. So do we have any more questions, Catherine?
I have one that's carrying over from our last conversation about leadership development, and it kind of ties into what you guys were just discussing. When is it appropriate from a candidate perspective or a new employee perspective to be asking really firm questions about concrete plans or structures that exist within a firm, a company, for that growth? In other words, if that information isn't volunteered by the employer, how does somebody seek that out in a professional manner?
Ask in the interview. I know candidates have asked me, and we actually have, they say, what are the professional development opportunities and how is my progress tracked over the course of a year? Just ask the question, because that will tell you, if the company has quarterly checkpoints, if they have a 1-year review process. I think just ask the question. It's a very smart question to ask.
And I would also check the LinkedIn of the people that are your peers to see how they've progressed in the company. Did they start out as a manager and then become a senior manager? And did they become a director? What's the progression? And look at the dates, because it's easy to say, oh yeah, we got this, we got that, we got that. And then you say, well, when was the last time someone got promoted? And they say, 2009. And you think, oh, crumbs. So don't just, I would lean in on that a little bit. I will say, because they've got a lot less time to deal with your professional development. So I would mention it early on. What I don't want you to do is make it seem to your manager that you're looking to get promoted right away, and then you won't be under her, purview anymore. You're not trying to get greedy and take her job. You're trying to professionally develop yourself. So I love Jennifer's answer. And then check out everybody and when they've been promoted so that you're on the
Oh.
right cycle.
And
So
by the way,
that's-
your manager's job is for them to take your job so they can progress.
For
So
sure.
anybody who's working with me, I want them to be better than I am by the time I've trained them.
Hmm.
Because otherwise you're not growing the next level of leadership.
Exactly. I was going to say the best answer to why is this job open is that the person who had it is now doing something else more,
Right.
new and different and bigger, either sideways, because obviously in a large firm, you can go sideways and learn things, or they've gone, to a higher management role, or they're the person interviewing you, which is how you learn these things, but that doesn't always happen. So.
I think it's important too, when these things are occurring, to this is a fact-finding mission. It's not personal. It's something that you're trying to understand as much about the company, of course, as they're trying to understand about you. So you shouldn't feel, I think if you take some of the emotion out of questions like that too, and, hey, I'm just trying to understand more about what this entire scenario is, that might take some of the pressure off too.
Agreed.
Next, yeah.
Well, I think that might be all we have time for. We're sitting right
I
at
was
the
just
limit.
looking, I was watching the clock tick over and just wondering whether there was one more little thing that anybody wanted to add on any of the subjects that we've talked about, which is, writing descriptions, interviewing, joining a company. And thank you all. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank
Been
you. I
great.
enjoyed this.
It's been great to be here.
Yes,
Thank
thank you so much. This is a great experience.
Want everybody back for the AMA.
Thank, thank you all. Thank you to our panel.
Everybody.
Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our attendees. Thank you to our moderator. Thank you again to our sponsors, TMS Lighting, Planet Construction, Shop Association, and VMSD. This has been a great conversation, and we hope to see you back in 4 weeks for an Ask Me Anything, and prepare those questions. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.